Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Air Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Visit airsport.ie.
So we're looking back in round 2 of the Heineken Champions Cup. On Saturday, Munster picked up a bonus point against Gloucester, helped in no small part by the dismissal of Danny Cipriani. Ulster that evening, well beaten in Paris by Racing, 44 points to 12. And then yesterday, Toulouse beat Leinster, 28 points to 27. In the Challenge Cup, meanwhile, 3 Chris Ashton tries for Sale meant defeat for Connacht. To look back on it all, we have Eddie O'Sullivan and Keith Wood with us. Evening, lads. So, Keith, we might start with yesterday. Leinster's first defeat in Europe in 10 games. We're going back 2 years to that Clermont semi-final, so this doesn't happen very often. All week, everybody felt that one way or another Leinster would come through.
Yeah, I felt that was the case. I thought that, to be honest, it was Leinster's to go down there and win. They were playing against a team that hasn't featured at all last year. And they were also, I think, riding high after the previous week. But they still had to play very well to try and get something out of it and to get the win. And I don't think anybody could have expected Toulouse to play in the manner in which they had. What they did, how they played, every part of the game was extraordinary. And for me, it goes down as one of the great Heineken Cup games, just for the quality and the style. It was a throwback to nearly 20 years ago, to the way Toulouse used to play. And it was an amazing game of rugby. I still fully believed Leinster would have gone and got the win at the end. Even with 2.5, 3 minutes to go, I said, Leinster know how to win this. They'll do it from here. And it didn't happen. Yeah.
Eddie, first 20 minutes, it was fairly clear they were in a game. So suddenly they were 14-0 down. They were struggling at the breakdown, which is an issue we should talk about. It seemed to be one of the keys of the game. Josh van der Vlaar goes off injured. So that first 20, 25 minutes, what's going wrong for Leinster? What's going right for Toulouse?
I think that they probably underestimated the intensity Toulouse would bring. They had a pretty easy day out against Wasps. It's easy to kind of lull yourself into a sense that you're going to be fine. And it's a hard one because, fellas keep thinking, it's going to be tough down in Toulouse. They're going to come at us. But you don't know for sure until they hit you, And I think they knocked Leinster out of their stride early doors. They really got into them. And that kind of set the tone of the game, which was a cracking game of rugby. Probably arguably one of the best games in the Heineken this year so far. But I would say that just caught Leinster a bit cold. But again, you have to give them huge credit, Leinster, for clawing their way back into the game a couple of times, And as Keith said there, even when Toulouse scored, it was 10 minutes on the clock, I really thought Leinster were going to probably go down and just nick it again. But they never got out of their half, really. They never got into a good strike position where you would expect them to do it. They had a couple of sorties, but, a bit sloppy with the ball. They'll kick themselves over it. Reece Struggle had a chip kick one time in 10, 15 minutes from the Toulouse goal line, which kind of turned the ball over, really. But all in all, I think, it's not a terrible result for Leinster because they still got the losing bonus point. Just what you take out of away games. Well, I suppose the expectation of Leinster was so high that we thought they'd go down and win. Even when they dug themselves out of the hole, we thought they'd go on to win it, and it didn't happen for them. But I still think they played very well, and you've got to give credit to Toulouse for playing really well also. So I just think maybe the first 20 minutes they got caught a little bit cold on the intensity front. But look, credit where credit is due. They came back into the game and they really ran it close. So I wouldn't be. I know they're disappointed. We lose a game by a point away from home, you're disappointed. Take 10 reasons why you might have won it, but I wouldn't be too disappointed. It might stand Leinster in good stead going forward a game like that.
The first Leinster try, the first one they conceded, that came, there was a turnover at the breakdown. I think Leinster had 15, 16 turnovers across the game, which is very unusual for a Leinster team, Keith. So the first one came after a turnover around midfield. Sean O'Brien missed a tackle on Tulafua for the second one. And then the third Toulouse try was a turnover as well. It was an intercept try. What was happening at the breakdown? We don't usually see Leinster struggling there.
Well, I think a lot of that is to do with the referee's interpretation. He allows a bit longer to get in there. I mean, for me, I was getting frustrated in Thomond Park with a variety of different things on Saturday, but certain things annoy me in the game. It is that level of interpretation. It's when is the ball out at the back of the ruck, which at times he was saying, no, the scrum half had lifted it. Other referees would let that go, which was improving Toulouse's line speed up into tack. So there was very little space for Johnny Sexton in the field. But at ruck time, they were attacking attacking beyond it, kind of coming in at the side a little, kind of at the back, but not at the back. Trying to get the second and third man with his hands in on the ball. It's a frustration for me because the ruck is frustrating because we were brought up to play the game where no hands in the ruck. So you're entitled to be able to put the ball back. But as we have at the moment, somebody puts his hand, he said, well, he's on his feet, he's fine. But if he's the third or fourth guy in and somebody else has been trying to do it, that's hands in the ruck. So for me, it wasn't one thing in the game. It was a variety of them. And in some respects, that just goes to interpretation. And I would have expected Leinster to deal with that, and they struggled with it, and they struggled with it a lot, and they were knocked off kilter. And I have to say, Toulouse had done a job on preparation for it, and they had read a variety of different moves, which we all talk about, the pull or the wraparound that Leinster do, and all the different options that are in there. And they took a couple of punts on it and said, well, if he does that, I'm going to run to get the ball. And yeah, partly because the referee had said the ball is out. Leinster had less time than they usually have. And I have to say, if you're looking at templates in how to put Leinster under pressure, I think we saw it in the Munster game to a degree, and we really saw it in the Toulouse game. So, which is great. It's great for the game because you don't want one team, streets ahead of everybody else. I think Leinster still are streets ahead of everybody else, but that was the performance of performances from Toulouse. And we have to say give them credit, but it isn't credit. This is like ripping up how they've played for the last number of years. It's entirely alien to how rugby has been played in France for nearly 10 years. So it's a pleasure to actually go and see it. It's a pity that we see it, and it's an Irish team that suffers for it, but it's phenomenal for the game.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think a lot of people, maybe the most diehard Leinster fans aside, Eddie, may have had that sense that, well, this tournament sort of needs to lose. They're so much a part of this tournament. And French indifference to this tournament creeping in is a disaster for it. So you want the French teams engaged. You want them playing the kind of rugby we saw yesterday. You
do. You want that kind of French style of rugby we talked about, but we've talked about for ages, but we haven't seen it for a long time. Very few teams play like France used to play, including the French team. So Toulouse seemed to have changed their whole headset for the game, which is great. And it was a rough and tumble game. Like, it was all over the place at times, but that's exciting. I mean, both teams missed nearly 30 tackles, which is crazy. But when both teams are doing it, you get that sort of looseness in the game. But I think that what you referred there to the ruck, I think it is a problem in the game at the moment because we have referees, which they're told to do is try and sanitise the ruck and decide, when there's hands in, when there's hands out, when it's a ruck, when it's not a ruck. When the ball is in, when the ball is out. There's all sorts of areas of the ruck at the moment that are they're trying to sanitise. And what happens from week to week is different referees referee the ruck differently, and you get different interpretations. And I think when Leinster have a referee that referees the ruck in favour of the defence or the attack, he won't let the defenders have much fuss at the ruck. They're impossible to get the ball off it. But Wayne Barnes yesterday let the defenders get in there, and I think at times as well, Leinster play out of usually played a bit of 1-3-3 offense where they keep runners wide, like a back rower wide, but they have a loose version of it, so it does incline to lose its shape in terms of where the forwards are, and at times then they miss a clean out. A couple of turnovers where that they just didn't get a second clean out in time. And that happens when you play a kind of an open-ended attack. It happens to the All Blacks as well. It's not as tight a structure as some teams play. So between Wayne Barnes not kind of refereeing it in favour of the attack as much as they'd have expected, and at times losing their shape a little, they did pay a price for that. But that was the type of game it was, and it cut both ways. So, but I think that just the bigger picture is the ruck is still very messy, and there's a ton of sealing off going on at the ruck, and referees are letting it go. And then we had we had a yellow card on Saturday at Thorne Park, which is a joke.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that in a second.
But that's where we are at that point in the game. It's still very messy, and they haven't got their head around it yet, that's for sure.
So, Look, I take your point that Toulouse played very, very well and Leinster maybe were just a few percentage points off as opposed to anything very worrying. Because Leo Cullen talked about bad behaviours. He said maybe one or two did creep into our game for whatever reason. Jamie Heaslip in the commentary at one point made the observation that Leinster were kicking to what was turning out to be a very, very good counter-attacking team. And actually he was saying, well, we need to either kick contestables or we need to kick the ball dead. We're not really doing either. So there'll be those kind of smaller details, you suspect, Keith, that they're looking at today as opposed to anything very worrying.
I think so. I'd also say it was interesting to hear Jamie Heaslip in commentary. He's a good commentator. He's going to do well. He's a very present day and almost real time interpretation of what's going on, which is interesting. But
anything jump out at you any observations from inside the camp almost?
Well, it's not even inside the camp, it's inside the game. And I think in many respects, and I know Eddie and I have been involved for most of our lives in the game, and it changes, and there are subtleties that change every now and then. And especially for us talking after the fact, it's easy because you can go and look back at it and say, yeah, that's right, yeah, that's wrong. But it was that little sense of some of the pressure he was talking about at ruck time, because he did mention it. He did mention Wayne Barnes twice or three times in the game. Yeah. I thought Barnes had a good game as well, by the way. But for Leinster, I do think there's one element you can get caught into. And when you play Toulouse, when they play like that, there's very little structure to the game. And, like Leinster score tries all over the place, but it is incredibly structured. And I think they got a little bit suckered in to the idea that an offload was on because there was offloads happening left, right and centre from Toulouse, or that different plays were on. And look, I didn't understand Johnny kicking with 3 minutes to go, kicking it up for pretty much an uncontested carry on.
Yeah, did he feel they were going nowhere?
I don't know. I was looking at it saying, yeah, I think they need to hold on to the ball and get up the field. And that's why I said, look, I thought there was a chance that Leinster were going to, I actually was certain that Leinster were going to win it, because I said they'll manage their way up the field and they'll have a drop goal, or they'll surely Toulouse will lose their discipline and give away a penalty or whatever it was. But maybe it was just one of those days, and it happens. This is the right time for it to happen for Leinster away from home. They still get a losing bonus point. They kind of get a bit of a kick in the teeth, and they still have to go ahead and win the rest of the matches, which they were going to want to do anyway. Yeah,
we mentioned Reggie Son, our friend from Bandon, last week. He had the Bandon Rugby Committee as special guests over. They were wined and dined and got to watch the game, and he was saying afterwards that it was beautiful and you can feel a positive new atmosphere. It's a restart for the club. It had that sort of feel from a Toulouse point of view. It's a very young team, Eddie. Can they make their mark in this tournament over the next couple of years?
Well, if they keep playing like that, there's no question they will. Like they are. I mean, they became a very one-dimensional, stagnant team under the back end of Guy Nove's reign. And they seem to have hit the reset button with a young team. And I suppose it depends on the long run if they can keep that up. You'd love to see that rugby every week, but it is pretty atypical of the top 14 as well. So, and you have to survive in the top 14. But if they can consistently deliver that sort of product, people will come to watch them, even if they're not winning all the time. So yeah, I think it's a breath of fresh air.
As for the pool on the whole, Keith, so Toulouse have taken control for the time being. They're 2 points ahead of Leinster. Leinster have Bath back-to-back in December, which is, always that kind of tough time after the November internationals, especially for Leinster, who are bulk suppliers to the national side, and then Toulouse will be coming to the RDS in January. So, I mean, you still sort of see, they'll sort of still get through it, is how you feel, but there's that little bit less elbow room.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot of elbow room ever in the Heineken Cup, and even with the manner in which Leinster did it last year, was that the only time or one of two times that a team had gone
twice,
wall to wall to win all their matches to go on it. The hyperbole of last week notwithstanding, Leinster class. They're a fantastic team. They have huge strength in depth. They are the best team in the competition. But it's a proper competition, and we just got an insight into that again. So I would fully expect Leinster to top the group. And to put themselves in a very good position for a home quarter-final, and then after that. Yeah.
We are here with, thanks to Air Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. We'll move on to Thomond Park on Saturday. Keith, I know you were there. The bloke with the drums beforehand is loud. That's observation one.
I heard your comment about that yesterday. I think you're showing your age, or else I was far enough away from him where he didn't bother me too much. They had him ramped up a little bit, but he seemed to get the crowd going.
Yeah.
I
guess you got to do it, and especially for an early kickoff like that to try and get the atmosphere going. But
it is, and you know what? There was actually a pretty good atmosphere, and then there wasn't a good atmosphere, and I think the red card kind of confused everybody. Something is detracting from the game that early on. When I think it was fair for everybody to think, it's okay, Munster are going to win from here on in. So there wasn't that level of doubt, and then there was a bit of nervousness with 10 minutes to go, but not real nervousness, I think.
We'll come to the red card and the referee in just a second, but I mean, the first 20 minutes, Eddie, which is really the only time in the game it was 15 on 15 because there was the Tom Savage yellow card, which you've mentioned, and you can give us your thoughts on that. But that first 20 for Munster was very messy. Right from the kickoff, they allowed it to bounce, and there was a really bad scrum around halfway. They lost one of their own lineouts. There was a knock-on stander, I think, in the 22. The first 20 minutes was everything you would presume Munster did not want on their first, the home European game kicking off this season. It was just weirdly, strikingly sloppy.
It's probably the bit of pressure that goes with the fact that the expectation is in Thome Park against Gloucester, Munster are going to win. And that can break two ways for a team. One is they can become complacent and say, we're going to win, and they go out half-cocked. I don't think that happens very often, except maybe, I suppose, Leinster underestimated, we'll say, the intensity coming from Toulouse in the weekend. But I think Munster wouldn't have been half-cocked, would be fair to say that. But I think there might have been an element of the fact that expected to win in front of the home crowd, and you go out and there's a lot of pressure off the bat, and you make a few early errors, and everyone gets a wee bit of jitters. There might be more of that than anything else.
Yeah.
But they were really kind of not in the zone. And it wasn't until the yellow card that they got a toehold in the game, and then the red card came pretty much after that, and it was all plain sailing until the last 10, 15 minutes. But I just thought that they just probably a little bit of pressure getting to in front of the home crowd, maybe. That was the only thing I could see. It just wasn't what you'd expect from a team like Munster, but they did make it very difficult for themselves early doors. But I thought the yellow card changed the game for that reason, because once Munster got to Troy on the back of that yellow card, they were kind of settled down, and they knew they were in control of things again. And I don't think it was a yellow card. I think it was a crazy yellow card to give, maybe a penalty. But these are game-changing moments, and this is the problem around the ruck, is the lack of consistency almost in the game. I mean, if you went through the games in the weekend, you could have given out 50 yellow cards for those clean-outs. There was a load of them in the Leinster game yesterday, but the game was so intense, nobody bothered about it. I mean, that yellow card came in the back of it. It was a pretty hard clean-out. But you always get a reaction with a hard tackle or a hard clean-out. And the crowd behind the assistant referee, let a big roar, and he stuck out his flag. And then suddenly they went over it and over, and they gave him a yellow card. And that changed the game. And that's the kind of stuff that drives coaches and players and a lot of spectators crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it just changed the game. Now, Cipriani's one was a red card under the law, a very tough one. I don't think Cipriani went in with any malice. He just got caught a bit high. But then again, the irony of all that is Billy 12-3 should have gone with a red card as well a few minutes later. His tackle was just as egregious as Danny Cipriani's, but the referee knew if he sent another Gloucester player off, it would turn into a complete farce, and he bottled it.
Yeah.
So what are the laws here? Are they laws, or are they kind of, is it kind of a la carte, you apply it when you think it won't have too much of an effect, and you don't apply it when it has a big effect. I suppose that's a bit facetious to say, but I just thought, if you stick to the letter of the law, Gloucester were down to 13 men, and that's which way do you want to play this?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of people make the point that the Billy 12-3's one on Carberry was worse than the Cipriani one. To paraphrase Neil Francis yesterday, he made the point, Keith, that when you have a zero-tolerance policy, sometimes consistency is the first thing to go. So the Cipriani red initially, we'll get on to the bigger picture, but Cipriani red, he had to get a red. The referee said, I have no choice, even though Cipriani, Johan Ackermann, his coach, said, my view is simple, it is spoiling the game if there is no intent. But intent is not the issue, really. No,
I think that's a poor argument for it. You have to be responsible to what you're doing on the field. I looked at it, and I said, which with what I saw it and how I saw it, and in real time as I saw it, I thought it was a yellow card. And I know within the letter of the law it's a red card. And I also know that World Rugby are doing their damnedest to try and bring the level of the tackle down. And for me, that I then understand why it's a red card. And I think we may end up with 3 or 4 weeks of this level of scrutiny on what's happening. Because the stand-up tackle, I wish World Rugby would just come out and say it. We want to get rid of the stand-up tackle. We want to get rid of that where you're in that position. We want you to go in, down low to make the tackle. And we know that it'll mean more offloads and a whole variety of other things. But I wish they'd just come out and say it straight away, because I started getting frustrated watching the game afterwards, because the next there was 4 penalties on the trot from Gloucester for high tackling. On the trot, straight away after that, I said, lads, you have to learn at some stage. He's been very strict in this. Go low, make the tackle.
Yeah. And
this stand-up tackle is a pretty new part of the game. It's there for 8 or 9 years. It's not there since time immemorial. And it is something we need to try and get rid of, for the fact that all the studies show that is one of the big causes for concussion to the tackler, as it turns out. But look, he was in the wrong position. He wasn't in a position to make the tackle. There was a tackle made. Scannell went down about 6 inches below hand. It could have been a contact with the middle of his chest, and it wasn't. Yes, there's no intent, but we just need to make certain we get rid of that level on it, because that's what World Rugby wants to do, and we have to accept that fact. And I think it's a difficult period of time at the moment, because we're looking at something and saying, well, we need to be consistent, and it isn't. Now, there was another one in the Cast game, and it was an absolutely stone red card straight away. The hooker got kind of blindsided and hit without the ball, hitting the tip of the chin. Of course, it was a red card. It was a red card all the time, and we need to be able to get to the idea that when we see it, we say, yeah, that's a red card straight away. And what we're saying at the moment is we haven't been educated enough into it, because it's pretty much been sprung on us in the last 2 weeks that there's pretty much zero tolerance for this. So we actually need to take a bit of time to get our head around it as well.
Yeah, I saw Tony Ward writing today, and he had a bit of sympathy, more than a bit of sympathy, in fact, for the tackler. He said, how can the tackler possibly react in an instant to getting his legs and arms at least level, or better still, even lower than the ball carrier, because the ball carrier dictates the odds at contact. Of course, safety is paramount in the tackle, and most particularly, such must be the message from the top down. But I fear we are losing our way. Do I have the definitive solution? No, I don't. And he wrote a full column on this, so I don't want to take him too much out of context. But I guess the tricky thing, Keith, you say we're in an interesting time, and that's probably the overarching feeling. It's the implementation now of this new reality. And will this be a couple of weeks? Like, will Gloucester have their meeting today, I wonder, and say, right, well, look, that's it, we just can't do this ever again? Or will they look at the 12 trees situation and say, well, look, you'll get away with it here and there? Like, we don't want months and months and months of really big games being decided by here and there someone getting punished and here and there someone else not getting punished. The hope would be, the ideal would be, that this thing happens pretty much close to overnight. Now, I don't know how confident both of you are. It's a question for both of you. I'll start with you, Eddie. I don't know how confident you are overnight we can get this thing turned around.
I'm not at all confident. In fact, I think this is not. We're not going to. I don't believe we can learn our way out of this. We can reduce the number of times it happens. I think players and coaches will become a lot more careful. I think they have become a lot more careful. But I think the nature of the game is a full contact sport. There is no obligation on the ball carrier to protect himself in any way. He can duck at the last second if he wishes. He's got no responsibility for how he's tackled. And players, running at different angles at full speed. Some guys are 6'8", some guys are 5'6". I don't think you can learn your way out of this. And there's going to be these accidents every week in, week out, week in, week out. And if we are, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to try and get this out of the game, we do have to reduce the risk to concussion. But I'm not sure it's that simple of just saying, okay, well, every time someone gets caught in the chin, it's a red card. And in 6 months' time, there'll be no more of these, or they'll be so rare it won't matter. I just think we're going to continue having these conversations every week, because there will be red cards, and there'll be other ones that are red cards that weren't award red cards because we've been down to 12 men or something. So I'm not confident we can learn our way out of this. I just think the game is so dynamic, so explosive. The athletes are so quick; they change direction so fast that this is an inevitability of a contact sport that we have. And the problem with saying we'll tackle everything low is it'll change the game completely. You won't be able to stop the football being offloaded, and that will change. Like, the offload is the simplest way to break the tackle line. But so I think it's a huge problem. I'm not saying I have the answer, and I'm not saying it's an easy solution. It's a difficult problem. But if you come at it with a kind of a low-resolution solution, say that every time a player slips above the nipple line, it's a penalty and a red card. But a lot of teams finishing with 12 aside, and I don't think we'll learn our way out of it. I'm worried about that part of the game.
Yeah, and what would you like the referee to have done with the Cipriani situation?
I think you have to look at it the point of view that Cipriani went in to make the tackle, and at the last second the ball carrier dipped into it. I think that's a factor. I don't think it'll be a red card for that. I think I think it can be a penalty, but I mean, if you notice, Cipriani backed out of the contact after he hit him because he realised he caught him high. Yeah. And, I'm not saying it's right that a player should get hit on the chin with a shoulder. It's not a good thing by any stretch. But I don't know how we adjudicate on it without having red cards every week. I don't think Cipriani going in next week is going to be any wiser as to how we can fix it. Because it was just a spur of the moment thing where you're in a position to make a tackle and you make it and then it goes wrong. Stephen Archer could have got a red card at the very end. I mean, that was a clothesline job. That was probably worse than Cipriani. And he got a yellow card for the last minute of the game when it made no difference to anything. So, this is going to happen week in, week out, week in, week out. I'm not complaining that we can't deal with it. We have to try and resolve it. But I don't think it's going away that simply by just referees forking out cards. I don't think that fixes it.
Yeah. There's texting along those lines. You can get your Heineken Star comments in. We're on Facebook. There's prizes to be given away. So Rory O'D, for instance, echoing one of your points, can there be an allowance in the decision for attacking players ducking before contact, or does it simply have to be black and white to simplify things for referees and to eliminate it altogether? I mean, if you take Eddie's point, Keith, you might have to make it black and white and have some tough moments. I mean, is Cipriani just, in a perfect world, in that instance, Scannell's coming near him, there's always the possibility Scannell could duck down. Is Cipriani just going to have to hunker down and hit him around waist level? Is that where this has to go?
Well, there's two things in it, and from even when I was playing, where they were trying to make everything black and white to fit into law, there does need to be a level of interpretation in with it. And I'm not saying that you let him off because it's accidental or things like that. They're all different cases. But if you look at Cipriani, he was never in a position to make the tackle. He was standing up. That's the wrong tackle. We have to get rid of that tackle. And if you look at Archer running in, he wasn't in a position to do it. He was too high anyway. So what was going to happen in that instance? And if you listen to what Van Graan has been saying in the last 2 weeks, he said, we know we can't tackle high anymore. So the reaction is from the coaches is, are they going to pick players who they may lose, after being on the field for 5 minutes and suddenly he's gone for 10 minutes? And it'll change the selection of the players. That is the nature of it. But I don't like the phrase zero tolerance, because I think you need to leave. And I'd still go back to this. We want to believe in the referees. We want the referees to be the arbiter of what they see as being right or wrong, to a level. And if they have a doubt over it, they can look at it and say, look, you have made contact up there. Nothing bad happened. And it was an accident and there's a fall. You need to get your tackle lower or whatever it is, or you're not going to be on the field much longer. In this instance, it's a yellow card. I think everybody would have accepted that, actually. But because it's zero tolerance, and the referee said, there's nothing I can do, you have to go off. Yeah, I think we'd all feel that's a little bit uncomfortable. And but I can guarantee you that it's the coach, Van Graan, would be more irritated by Archer's because a player sidestepped him and he's not in the right position to which to make the tackle, and he could have dipped or not dipped. He's still too high to be in that position. It means his body position's in the wrong place. He's going to be more frustrated than anybody else. So I just think we're going to have a difficult couple of months. Okay. And once it jumps into international rugby, it tends to loosen for that reason, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in that period of time.
Yeah, no, an interesting couple of ones coming up. You have to run, I know. So do you want to just give an overall point on what you saw at Thomond and Joey Carberry, man of the match, whatever you want to pick up on?
Yeah, I thought Gloucester weren't great for a lot of the game. I thought for about 50 minutes of the game, they didn't bring a whole lot of energy to it at all. I thought they were a bit sloppy and a bit off the mark. Munster were a bit messy. They were trying to ease their way into the game. For some reason, it started off with a kickoff that nobody wanted to catch, and that just seemed to kind of drift into the rest of the game. So that was a bit of a shame. For me, I thought Carberry. I thought Carberry played really well. I thought he worked incredibly hard defensively. His great tackle near the end to pull down a guy who I would have said was faster than he was, but the effort he wanted to make certain that guy wasn't going anywhere. That's one of those belief things. I liked the pairing of Mathewson when he came on, and I think I think they're really. I mean, the passing when the two of those are going together, there's a lot of space for Carberry, and I think that made a bit of a difference. And Munster upped their game at the end of it. I thought a lot of players put in a really, really good and hard shift, and I thought they had won it very comfortably. I do think they lost their way because of having the extra player. I do think at times they didn't kind of fully adhere to what it is that they would have gone into the game, and that can happen sometimes. But they also had won it comfortably. Some of the kicking was excellent. It was, do you know what? It was a performance where we got to see Munster playing very well in periods of time, better than they've done in the season, against serious opposition, and still have an awful lot to work on. I think you'd take all that when you've got 5 points in the bag. Okay,
we'll let you go. Thanks a million, Keith.
Brilliant. Cheers, lads.
Cheers. Keith Wood there. Eddie, I guess the other thing for Munster is when you get Chris Farrell back, when you get Conor Murray back, obviously, you get Keith Earls back, and Murray alongside Carberry. I mean, that back line is shaping up quite nicely, nicer than they've had in a few years. So it's a weird kind of game. It's a bonus point win at home in Europe, much like we're saying, Leinster, a bonus point away from home to Toulouse is kind of disappointing. It's kind of strange to be slightly disappointed or underwhelmed by a bonus point win at home.
I just think that the game itself was spoiled by the red card. I think, in some ways, had Munster played against 15 and got the bonus point, they'd feel much better about themselves. It's hard to know what to take out of a game when you're playing against 14 players, and Gloucester were just drowning out there at times because Munster, kept the pressure on them. And then when the game was, locked up, Munster kind of fell asleep and Gloucester woke up. So it was a weird end to the game, it was almost like Gloucester played a better rugby in the last 10 minutes. So I just think Munster would be a little bit disappointed maybe, and probably the deflationary part of the last 10 minutes, giving up a couple of tries, that takes a bit of the wind out of your sails.
Yeah.
But look, if you told Munster at the start of the tournament they'd have got the draw they got, and they've got this bonus point win at home, they'd bite your hand off. So they're in a good place, and when the dust settles, they'll take what they've got. But I thought Carberry was excellent, more on his defensive work than anything. He got an armchair ride as 10 because they had the extra player up front, they had the advantage. I mean, I was amazed to see that Gloucester, well, they were under huge pressure scrum, put a whole back row down at a scrum 5 minutes from the goal line. And Joey Carberry walks in with the hand putting them really, Gloucester were just in a bad place. But I thought Carberry's defence was excellent. An area I always worried about him a little bit, because he's not that big, but in fairness to him on the weekend, he made some great tackles in the backfield.
And
but I thought his game, actually his best performance on Munster was an extra, but that's last week, so we're dealing with this week.
And one last point, it seems like with each passing week, Tadhg is edging ever closer to being an Irish 23. You've got Ryan and Henderson and Toner, and now Byrne, and 3 or 4 into 3 doesn't go. And Byrne can also play back row and second row, which makes him, I mean, you've been in that position picking benches as well, must make him a tempting option.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I guess what guys are saying is that there's huge competition across the provinces now, particularly like Leinster setting the tone that it's very hard to get into that Irish team, and you get these windows of opportunity to make your case, and no one can kind of sit back and go, well, I'm nailed down, bar probably I suppose, Johnny Sexton and Conor Murray, but there's 13 spots up for grabs, really. And you see everybody just making their case. And these are the ones you make it in. Like, as a coach, when you're sitting down this week to pick your squad for the autumn internationals, the games that resonate are the Heineken games. Like, that's the facts of it. They're the ones that play at the higher intensity. They're the tougher matches. You ask bigger questions. And if you deliver on that platform, the Pro 12 kind of drifts into the distance a bit. The Pro 12 gets the coach's eye on you, and the European games gets them to pick you. And that's the way it works. And guys know that. So it's a good space to be in, because we've got a lot of guys putting their hand up. It's a bloody hard selection, which is a great migraine for any coach.
And where are you on Byrne and those 3 out of the 4?
And I think Tyg Byrne has made a big case, but I think the case he makes is probably against Ian Henderson. He's a similar type player.
Right.
I think he'd be seen as a second row now. I think the back rows, you could talk about the back row for an hour, but I think O'Mahony is in there, because O'Mahony has caused havoc as a defensive line jumper as well. You can't throw the ball anywhere near O'Mahony if you're throwing the ball in and he's defending it. He'll get to it somehow. So, I think O'Mahony's in there. There's a big discussion, I suppose, at number 8, because Conan's there, but I think CJ Standard gets that spot. And then with Van der Fleer, it looks like he's out again now. Who gets the number 7 spot? Like, I've a sense that there's a good few candidates for that one. But I do think that Tyg Byrne will probably be pushing more for the second row. And then again, Toner is the guy who wins all the lineouts. Like, it's hard to lose a lineout with Toner. So I think there's a good scramble there for the second row positions, and James Ryan has been outstanding. So it's a serious amount of depth at that back 5 positions, So I think Tyg Byrne has made his case, but it's probably a case against Ian Henderson. And it wouldn't surprise me if he knocked Ian Henderson off his perch, because he's similar to Henderson, but he's probably playing 5 or 10% above Henderson at the moment. Now, that's maybe not Henderson's fault. He's stuck in a team at Ulster who are, still finding their feet and had a rough day out,
Yeah, okay, interesting. So a word then on Ulster, 44-12. They started well. The last 58 minutes, they lost 41-0. They obviously have injuries, not least up front, so they struggled up front at times, and, Racing are rather good too. So it was that kind of day for them.
Yeah, I was still disappointed with Ulster that, they got a brilliant start to the game. Like, they had a couple of scores, and they got one of the tries against the yellow card, which is brilliant. That you're away from home, you do that, you think, right, we're in this, we're going to go for it, and then literally the wheels came off big time. They didn't score for most of the game. Some of the stuff they did, well, let's take it in bits. Their scrum was under huge pressure, and I thought getting Marty Moore back would have resolved a lot of those problems, but I don't think Marty Moore will be waiting by the phone for the Autumn Internationals after that last Saturday, I thought their lineup was messy, sloppy at times, and there's no reason for that. They had line-out options. And I thought their 2 strike wingers, basically Stockdale and Gilroy, just couldn't hold on to the ball at key times, which killed them. But I do think they're not at the top table yet, Ulster, and they're still trying to find their feet. And I think, that was a sobering lesson from last Saturday in Paris. But I think they're going in the right direction. But I think the danger sometimes you get a good result. Like they dug out a really good result against Leicester. You kind of get ahead of yourself. I think there's none of that this morning in Kingspan Stadium when they circle up for a review,
Yeah.
So, but having said that, I think there's positives there for them, but they are not back at the top table of European rugby yet, and that was a good lesson from on Saturday.
Yeah, the very last point then, I'm even kind of wary of bringing it up because there's already been a disproportionate amount of talk about Simon Zebo and then the apology then you would want. I mean, it's a fairly simple, probably shouldn't have done it, it's not a great thing to do, especially 20-year-old guy in there, and then he apologised straight away, and I think the world has moved on pretty quickly. It's just been talked about a lot.
Yeah, look, you know my thoughts on that, Joe, on showboating. Like, I'm completely against it under any circumstance. And I'm a huge Zebo fan. Like, I'd be the guy saying that he should be still in the Irish TV boys in Paris, but I was gutted he did that. He let himself down. Look, he apologised for it, and that's fair enough. Like, move on. But I hope I never see him do that again, because you can't do that again some other time and then apologise after it. You get one apology. Yeah. And I think he did the right thing. I give him a pass on the fact that it was a moment of kind of, I won't say madness, but a moment of overjoy. But I would expect never to see that again from him. He's a phenomenal player, and it just shouldn't be in his Rolodex to do that, you know.
Okay. Eddie, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Air Sport. Every Champions Cup and now every Pro 14 game only on the Air Sport pack.